So, if you're running a business in Singapore and trading with other countries, there's a good chance your deals are being governed by a set of rules you've never even heard of. It's kind of like a hidden legal framework that's working in the background. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what it is. It's the classic headache of doing business globally, right? You seal a deal with a partner overseas, everything seems great, until it's not. Suddenly there's a dispute, and the big question pops up. Whose laws do we follow? Yours? Theirs? That uncertainty, it's a massive risk for any business. But don't worry, we're going to break it all down and make it super simple. We'll start with why this is a problem in the first place, then we'll introduce the global solution. After that, we'll get into the really important stuff, when it automatically kicks in for Singaporean businesses. We'll even highlight a few crucial rule changes you absolutely need to know. And finally, we'll show you how to take back the wheel and control your own contracts. All right, so let's dive into Section 1. This is the core problem that pretty much every international business has to deal with. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to play a game of chess, but your opponent is playing by the rules of checkers. It would be chaos, right? Well, that's what international sales can feel like without a common ground. When legal systems clash, figuring out your rights and obligations can get really complicated and, frankly, very expensive. So, how do you fix a problem like that? Well, the international community got together and basically said, hey, we need a single, neutral rulebook that everyone can use. And that rulebook is called the CISG. You can just think of it as a standard, off-the-shelf set of terms and conditions for international sales. It covers the basics, things like how a contract is officially formed and what the fundamental rights and duties of the buyer and seller are. And listen, this isn't some obscure treaty that nobody's heard of. It's a huge global standard. We're talking more than 83 countries, and that includes most of the world's biggest economies, China, the USA, Germany, you name it. And since Singapore has been on board since 1996, this directly affects businesses right here. Okay, now for the part you really need to pay attention to, especially if you're doing business from Singapore. When does this universal rulebook just automatically apply to your deals? Here is the absolute bottom line. If your business is in Singapore and you're selling goods to a company in another member country, let's say China or the US, then bam, the CISG automatically governs your contract. It's the default setting. It's switched on unless you actively switch it off. Now, things could have been a little more complicated, but Singapore did something really smart. There's a second, more complex rule that could sometimes apply the CISG, but Singapore officially said, nope, we're opting out of that. What that means for you as a business here is that the rule is incredibly clean and simple. The CISG only kicks in when both you and your partner are in member countries, period. And I really need to hammer this point home. When the CISG applies, it is not just a set of friendly guidelines. It is the law of your contract. Its rules literally override any conflicting Singaporean laws. It's not an add-on, it's a full-on replacement for that specific deal. So if this thing replaces the law you're used to, what actually changes? Let's look at a few really important differences between the CISG and the local Singaporean law you probably know. First up, when is a deal actually a deal? Under Singapore law, we sometimes have what's called the postal rule. This means a contract can be formed the second you drop that acceptance letter in the mail. But the CISG is different. It uses the receipt rule. Your acceptance doesn't count until the other person actually receives it. It might seem like a small timing difference, but it can have huge legal consequences. Here's another big one. Let's say you tell a potential client, hey, this offer is good for the next 10 days. Under Singaporean law, you can often change your mind and take back that offer before they accept. But the CISG is much stricter. If you put a time limit on your offer, it's considered a firm promise. You cannot revoke it during that period. And what if things go really wrong and you need to cancel the whole contract? Well, Singaporean law can get pretty technical about whether a major or minor part of the deal was broken. The CISG, on the other hand, simplifies things. It just asks one big question. Was the breach fundamental? In other words, did what happened pretty much ruin the entire point of the deal for you? Only then can you walk away. Okay, so after hearing all these automatic rule changes, you might be feeling a little bit uneasy. But here comes the best part. You are not stuck with any of this. You have the power to choose the rules for your own game. Honestly, if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Knowing these rules gives you control. Yes, the CISG is the default, but it absolutely does not have to be your choice. And this isn't some secret loophole. This freedom is built right into the rulebook itself. Article 6 is basically the CISG's own giant opt-out button. It says loud and clear that you and your trading partner are totally free to exclude the convention, either completely or even just the specific parts you don't like.
So, how do you actually press that opt-out button? It's surprisingly easy. You just have to be explicit and put it in writing in your contract. A simple clause, just like this one, makes your intention perfectly clear. This one sentence puts familiar Singaporean domestic law back in the driver's seat and switches the CISG off. It really is that straightforward.
So the next time you're putting together an international sales contract, you've got a choice. Are you going to let the default rules just happen to you, or are you going to step up and intentionally design the legal framework that works best for your deal? Now you know the rules. The power is in your hands.